A Cambridge PhD student killed her advisor by leaving a chalk line open during a magic experiment. The explosion disintegrated him. Now Alice Law has drawn a fresh pentagram and descended into hell. Not to rescue someone she loved, she despised him, but because, without Professor Grimes' signature on her dissertation, her career is dead. And she cannot live with the guilt of knowing she is the reason he's dead. She is not alone. Peter Murdoch, her rival who won the fellowship she needed, forced his way into the journey at the last moment. He's smart, secretive, and completely opaque about why he's really here. Before the descent, Alice found his notebook, a soul swap formula with her name circled and 3 question marks. She now believes Peter plans to trade her soul for Grimes's. This is R.F. Kuang's Katabasis, a novel that takes the ancient hero's descent to the underworld and gives it a lethal academic twist. Hell is structured like Cambridge A tribunals that operate as an endless, meaningless bureaucratic review, where your future still depends on a predator's approval. It's a story about guilt, forced cooperation, and a rescue mission that might be a trap. It asks what you're willing to pay half your remaining life, your integrity, maybe yourself, to undo your worst mistake, and it refuses to let anyone off easy. Episode 1. The Descent and the Cracks Appear. This is Alice Law, a Cambridge PhD student about to draw a chalk pentagram and descend into hell to bring back the soul of her dead advisor, Professor Grimes. She stands in Laboratory 9, early October, the first day of Michaelmas term. Outside, Cambridge drizzles. Inside, the lab smells of chalk dust and ozone. Alice has spent weeks planning this. She has packed lembas bread, a perpetual flask, thermal blankets, 2 good knives. Her heart is beating hard enough to register in her throat, but her hands are steady. She kneels on the stone floor and draws the transport pentagram, one careful arc of chalk after another, complete and closed. She recites the catechism. My name is Alice Law. I am a graduate student at Cambridge. I study analytic magic, and the pentagram begins to glow. Peter modifies the chalk circle at the last moment. That is when the door swings open. Peter Murdoch walks in. Peter is Alice's academic rival, the department prodigy, the one who always gets the fellowships, the one who makes everything look effortless. He strolls into the lab wearing an oversized jumper and wire-rimmed spectacles, takes in the glowing pentagram, and says nothing. Instead, he drops to his knees, produces a stick of chalk, and begins to modify the diagram Alice has just finished. Stop, Alice says. Peter does not stop. His chalk moves fast over the stone. He is mapping new lines into the transport pentagram of Tsu Setia, adding his own variables, making space for 2. Alice feels the magic flicker under her feet. What are you doing? I'm coming with you. She wants to scream. She has planned this alone. She needs to do this alone. Grimes is her advisor, her dead advisor, and she is the reason he is dead. That guilt belongs to her alone, and she does not want Peter anywhere near it. But the pentagram is already changing, growing, accommodating a second traveler. She cannot stop the transit now. If she tries to cancel, the backlash will kill them both. Peter finishes his work, steps into the circle beside her, and looks at her with an expression she cannot read. Ready? Alice is not ready. She recites the catechism anyway. The spell takes them. For a moment, Alice is nothing, no body, no skin, no heartbeat. Then the world crashes back. She opens her eyes and finds herself kneeling on gray sand. She checks her ribs, her stomach, her legs. Everything is intact, though her skin is coated in a fine gray powder. Peter stands beside her, brushing dust from his sleeves. They are in the asphodel fields. The sky above is dark red, the temperature mild, almost like an English spring. In the distance, a white line cuts across the horizon. Alice exhales. The transport worked. She is in hell. I'll say this much, Peter remarks. It's less sulfurous than I expected. Alice doesn't answer. She's thinking about the price, half her remaining life. The catechism was clear. That price has already been paid, automatically, the moment she arrived. She does not know how many years she had left, 30, 40, but half of them are gone now. She wonders briefly whether it hurts. She cannot feel it. Maybe she will feel it later. The 4 dead undergraduates speak of Grimes. They walk. The asphodel fields are full of shades. The recently dead, milling about, directionless, waiting. Many shades never leave this place. The bureaucratic machinery of the 8 tribunals moves slowly, and some ghosts have been standing here for centuries, unable to decide whether to move forward or simply unwilling to try. Alice and Peter pass through the observation pavilion. A peculiar structure where the boundary between the living and the dead grows thin. Alice can see Cambridge through the mirrored walls, can see the junior researchers in the department library bent over their books. She presses her face close to the glass and shouts, "Boo!" The researchers do not react. Peter gives her a look. "What?" she says. "If I can't haunt my colleagues, what's the point of coming to hell?" They walk on. Alice has brought an anchor, a wooden plaque from Paris, supposedly capable of drawing a specific soul toward her. Peter looks at it with visible dismay and explains, very patiently, that the anchor's resonance is too generic. The plaque will pull toward any soul that ever felt some connection to that piece of wood, which means carpenters, lovers of trees, the entire manufacturing chain. It is useless for finding one particular dead magician. Alice feels her face heat. She should have thought of this. Peter performs a sacrifice instead. He produces a packet of cheap cigarettes, uncorks a flask of port wine, and tears apart a piece of bread. He arranges these items in a rough triangle and lights the cigarettes one by one. The smoke curls upward and fills the air with a distinct smell of the faculty, common room tobacco and old coffee and dust, and something that might be furniture polish. Home. The smell draws a cat, first Archimedes, the department's resident Tom, who died years ago and now pads through the fields with the same lazy contempt he displayed in life. He sniffs Peter's offering, meows once, and darts away. Then the shades arrive. 4 of them. Undergraduates, by the look of them. Young, hesitant, dressed badly. 3 are badly burned, their skin charred black, their mouths open in silent screams. The 4th is almost intact, a girl whose only visible injury is a thin line of soot around her throat. Alice knows who they are. 30 years ago, a laboratory accident killed 4 students under Grimes's supervision. Gas leak, the university said. No one investigated too closely. The 4 of them have been standing in the asphodel fields for 3 decades, waiting. Professor Grimes came through here, the intact girl tells Alice, her voice soft and hungry. He asked us for directions. He wanted to know how to reach the first tribunal. Did you tell him? Of course. He said hello and kept walking. He was in a hurry. Alice turns to look at the white line in the distance. Grimes has already passed. He is ahead of them, somewhere in the system of the tribunals. The race is on. Peter freezes, on the wall of bone. The white line is a wall made of bone, human bone, compacted with a density of concrete, rising straight up into the dark red sky and stretching to infinity in both directions. At its base, a mass of shades presses forward, a shuffling queue of the dead that pushes and mutters and goes nowhere. This is the border into the first tribunal, and the only way through is patience. The dead have waited centuries. They will wait centuries more. Alice tries to cut the queue. The shades solidify against her, a wall of ghostly flesh that shoves her back without exactly touching her. Peter grabs her shoulder. We're not getting through that way. A shade nearby, an elderly woman, with a mathematician's intensity, notices the chalk dust on their fingers. You're magicians, she says, from Cambridge. She tells them Grimes came through days ago, moving fast, probably already deep in the tribunal system by now. Alice looks up at the wall. We climb. Peter goes pale. Climb? Bone is excellent for climbing. Handholds everywhere. You brought rope? Yes. Yes, I brought rope. His voice is thin. Alice does not know, yet, that Peter is terrified of heights. She discovers this about 20 meters up, when she glances down and finds him frozen against the wall, forelimbs trembling, forehead slick with sweat. I think I'm having a panic attack, he announces. Alice laughs. She cannot help it. They are clinging to a wall made of human skeletons in the middle of hell, and her rival, the insufferable prodigy who stole her fellowship, is afraid of heights. Listen to me, she says. Hesitation is your worst enemy. If you see a foothold, just throw yourself at it. Look at me. He looks at her. You want to fall? She asks. In Colorado, when I climbed, I used to let go on purpose. Not enough to die, but enough to feel the drop. You have to want the fall. If you can want the fall, you'll stop being afraid of it. Peter closes his eyes. His chest heaves. Then, very slowly, he begins to move again. Hand up, foot up, hand, foot. Alice talks him through every meter, and when they finally reach the top, she reaches down and pulls him onto the ledge. He collapses against her, shaking, and she feels tears on her neck. She does not know what to do with this sudden, raw vulnerability from a man who has been nothing but arrogance and competition since she met him. She holds still and says nothing. After a moment, Peter pulls himself together and pulls away. Neither of them speaks about it. The Cook Fellowship falls to Peter. They make camp at the base of the wall in the thin twilight that passes for night in this part of hell. The descent was brutal. Alice's forearms are scraped raw. Peter's hands are bloody. They eat lembas bread in silence, and then Peter says, "Thank you for what you did up there." Alice shrugs. "If you fall, you take me with you. It was self-interest." Peter doesn't smile. He looks down at his bread, and after a pause, he says, very quietly, "I got the Cook Fellowship." This lands like a blow. Alice had forgotten, during the terror of the climb, that the fellowship results were due. She had forgotten to be anxious. Now the anxiety arrives all at once. She did not get the fellowship. Peter did. Of course Peter did. "Congratulations," she says, and her voice comes out flat. Peter nods. He looks miserable. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. You earned it." Alice does not believe this, but she says it because she must. She is too tired for the alternative. She wraps herself in a thermal blanket and stares at the dark red sky and thinks about all the ways Grimes promised her the fellowship, assured her she was the favorite, and then delivered nothing. She thinks about the summer trip to Italy she went with Grimes, not Peter. Peter was supposed to go. Grimes changed his mind at the last moment and took Alice instead. She had thought then that it was a sign of favor. Now she is not sure what it was a sign of. Peter breaks the silence. "Earlier, you said you'd never let me fall." "I said that. Would you really have caught me?" Alice considers the question. "Yes," she says. "Not because I like you, because if you fall, I have to explain it to the department." That startles a laugh out of Peter. It is the first genuine laugh she has heard from him in months. They share the thermal blanket. The temperature drops as they sleep. Alice dreams of nothing for the first time in weeks. Her mind is blank. When she wakes, Peter is still beside her, breathing softly, his face slack and young in the dim light. She feels a needle of affection and immediately crushes it. The Pride Tribunal is an infinite library. The first tribunal is a library. This feels almost like a joke. Alice has spent her entire adult life in libraries. She knows the particular smell of old paper, the creak of wooden chairs, the exaggerated hush of people who believe silence proves they are thinking. The Pride Tribunal Superbia manages to reproduce all of these things with perfect fidelity. The only difference is that the shelves extend upward into a dark spiral that seems to have no top, and the shades at the reading tables have been sitting there for decades, unable to pass the test. The test is this: you must define the good. You must write a definition and defend it orally before a panel of your peers. If you fail, you try again. If you succeed well, no one in living or dead memory has succeeded, so no one knows what happens next. Alice learns all of this from a shade named Moore, a former Cambridge don who now acts as the gatekeeper of the Pride Library. Moore is friendly at first. He gives them a tour. He shows them the statuary shades calcified into stone for minor academic sins, like bragging about where they went to university or rejecting journal articles for insufficient citation. He takes evident pleasure in listing the offenses. Alice finds Moore irritating. He does not want visitors to leave, she realizes. He has been here so long, tending his infinite library, that he has forgotten that the point is to move forward. When Alice asks how she can advance to the second tribunal without defining the good, Moore gets flustered. "You can't just leave," he insists. "The tribunals are sequential. Pride before desire, desire before greed, and so on. You have to pass each one." Alice and Peter exchange a look. They have neither the time nor the inclination to produce a philosophical treatise on the nature of goodness. They need to find Grimes, and Grimes is clearly not in this library. His pride would never allow him to define the good as a mere academic exercise. He would consider it beneath him. "What happens," Alice asks the gatekeeper, "if we simply walk out the door?" Moore begins to explain, and Alice interrupts him with a question about premises. He answers. Alice asks another question, and another, leading him through a logical chain that arrives at an infinite regress premises, requiring premises, forever. While Moore stands frozen, his mouth half open, trapped in his own logic, Alice and Peter walk calmly out of the library. Outside, a howl rises from Moore's office. The shades stir in agitation. Alice does not look back. The Lethe almost takes Alice. Beyond the Pride Tribunal flows the Lethe. The river of forgetting is a paradox, calm and glassy from a distance, churning violently up close. The roar of the current fills Alice's head. She can feel her memories loosening. individual thoughts unspooling like thread from a bobbin. She knows intellectually that a single spray of this water could strip an entire truth from her mind, erase a person she loved, a skill she mastered, a fact she relied on. But knowing is not feeling. What she feels, standing on the bank of the Lethe, is relief. The pressure of her memories, every shame, every failure, every sharp detail, has been crushing her for months. The Lethe offers an alternative, oblivion, a clean, white emptiness where nothing hurts. She can see, on the far side of the river, a small figure, an old woman in a grey robe, stirring a steaming pot. Mengpo, the goddess of forgetting. The old woman looks at Alice and smiles. She holds out a cup. Alice begins to walk forward. Peter's voice is distant, then loud. His hands close on her arm, hard enough to hurt. Alice. Alice, look at me. No, Alice says. The water is right there. She can feel the spray on her face. Her mind is emptying, and it feels like waking from a nightmare. Let me go. Recite the catechism, Peter orders. Now. I don't want. Recite it. She recites it. The words come out slurred. Her name, Cambridge. Analytic magic. By the time she reaches the end, her head is clearing. Peter drags her backward, away from the river, and she feels the full weight of her memories settle back onto her shoulders. She pulls free of his grip and walks ahead without speaking. She is ashamed. She almost gave up. She almost surrendered to the river's promise of peace. The shame sits in her chest like a stone. Behind them, the first clicks begin. Vertebrae and bone rubbing against bone. The sound of something following. Grimes's pentagram surfaces on her skin. Later, much later, after the bone creatures have attacked and been beaten back, Peter bleeding from his forearm, Alice shaking, the two of them huddled near the river, because the creatures flee from Lethe. Water, Alice falls. She is dragged into the Lethe by a dying bone creature, its jaws locked around her ankle. The water closes over her head, and for a suspended instant, she cannot remember who she is. Then Peter's hands are on her, pulling her up, and she breaks the surface, gasping. She should have lost something. A memory, a skill, a fact. Peter quizzes her frantically, her name, the date, her favorite Beatles song, and Alice answers all of them correctly. She's amazed. The Lethe touched her, swallowed her, and she remembers everything. Peter stares at her. That's impossible. Alice feels it then. A tingling in her forearm, a strange warmth beneath the skin. She pushes up her sleeve. Glowing there, in white chalk that pulses with a faint, steady light, is a permanent pentagram. It has been tattooed into her skin for over a year. Professor Grimes put it there, in the villa outside Florence, over the course of a long, hot summer of experiments she was never supposed to talk about. Alice looks at Peter. Peter looks at the pentagram. They both know, without speaking, what this means. I am immune to the Lethe, Alice says, because I cannot forget. Grimes made sure of that. Peter's notebook reveals a soul swap. There is a camp again, and talk. Long, raw talk, the kind that happens when you have almost died together, and the adrenaline has burned off, and all that remains is exhaustion and the absence of pretense. Alice tells Peter about Italy, about the experiments, the dead cats, the pain of the tattoo needle moving across her skin for hours, while Grimes murmured reassurance. She tells him that she consented, she wanted it, she asked for it, and that she has regretted it every day since. The perfect memory Grimes gave her is a curse. She can recall every humiliation, every failure, every moment of cruelty, with flawless clarity. She cannot forget anything, and the Lethe, which should be death to memory, cannot touch her. Peter listens without interrupting. When she finishes, he tells her something. Two about stealing human colons from cadavers for Grimes, about forging paperwork, about the things he did to stay in Grimes's orbit. They share stories of their advisor like soldiers, comparing wounds from the same general. It is the closest Alice has ever felt to Peter. Then she finds his notebook. She's not searching. The camp is quiet. Peter is asleep. Alice, restless, reaches for his pack to find the map, and her hand finds the notebook instead. She opens it. The first pages are what she expected. Calculations, derivations, notes on Hell's geography. But the last pages are circled and underlined. The handwriting pressed hard into the paper. Alice deciphers the symbols one by one, her logic training coming back to her despite the headache. It is an organic exchange spell, a soul swap. The axioms are clear. An organic exchange cannot be performed on oneself. Another conscious mind is required. The target variable has been filled in. Her name, Alice Law, underlined twice, with the 3 question marks in Peter's neat, familiar handwriting. Alice? Alice closes the notebook and places it back in Peter's pack. Her hands are cold. She looks at Peter, still sleeping, his face slack and unguarded, and she feels the trust between them crack like old plaster. He plans to trade her. He plans to bring Grimes back by swapping her soul for her advisors. Alice lies down on the sand, staring at the red-black sky, and forces her breathing to stay slow and steady. She cannot let Peter know that she knows. She must pretend that nothing has changed. And she must decide, before they reach Grimes, what she is going to do about it. The clicks of the bone creatures sound again, somewhere far out in the darkness. Alice closes her eyes and waits for morning. Episode 2. The Apple of Fear. The space between the second and third tribunals is not a path. It is loose outcrops and ravines where the Lethe curls into side channels, and the red-black sky presses down close enough to touch. Alice walks ahead, Peter a few paces behind. The pack on her shoulders is heavy with the canisters of Lethe water, the last of the lembas bread, the compass that points toward whatever she most wants to find. Peter carries his own pack, and inside it is the notebook. She has not confronted him about it. She has decided she will not. The bone creatures have not attacked since the river crossing, but the clicking tracks them from somewhere out in the dark. Every few minutes, Alice catches herself straining to locate the sound, and every time it has shifted further left, closer, further back. The creatures are patient. They have been patient for a long time. Behind her, Peter adjusts his pack. She hears the flap close, the buckle click. Her jaw tightens. Then the rocks rearrange themselves. Alice notices it as a shift in her peripheral vision. Formations she was sure stood to her left now blend into formations on her right. The ground reconfigures without a sound. The air grows still in a way that feels deliberate, and the temperature drops, a sudden cold that tightens the skin on her arms. Seated on the flat stone ahead of them, where no one was seated a moment before, is a woman in gray silk. Her hair is pinned with silver needles. Her hands are busy with something invisible in her lap. She is weaving. The threads catch light that does not exist. The woman does not introduce herself. She tells them a story instead, a story about a cowherd and a weaver, separated by a river of stars, permitted to meet only once a year. The bridge of magpies that spans the river is built from the loyalty of birds. The woman is the goddess who built it, she explains, and her lover has been lost to the Lethe. He drank from it, forgot her entirely, and reincarnated. She still waits, she still loves, and she still tests those who pass through her territory, Beka. She wants to believe someone, somewhere, is capable of the loyalty that was taken from her. You propose a test, the weaver says, and her hands stop moving. I will build a bridge of stars to any place you wish, any tribunal, any frontier, even the throne of King Yama. But only if you pass. And if we don't, Peter asks, then I throw you into the Lethe. Alice feels cold, despite the dry heat of the plains. She has nearly surrendered to the Lethe once already. The memory of that peace, the quiet blankness of forgetting, hums in her chest like a struck bell. The weaver extends her hands. 2 apples appear on the stone before her, one red as arterial blood, the other a brilliant poisonous green. The rules are simple. It is a prisoner's dilemma. Alice recognizes the structure immediately, because she has been playing it in her head since she opened that notebook. Cooperate or defect, trust or betray. If both choose red, they pass together and the bridge opens. If both choose green, no bridge appears and both are cast into the river. But if one chooses red and the other green, the one who chose green receives unlimited protection through the tribunals. The one who chose red is thrown alone into the Lethe. The weaver raises a wall of silk between them. Alice stands alone on her side of the barrier, staring at the 2 apples. The red one means she trusts Peter. The red one means she believes he will not trade her soul for the professor. The green one means she survives alone. She reaches for the red apple. Her hand stops. She sees, in rapid succession, the notebook page, the circled formulas, her name with 3 question marks. Alice? She sees Peter's calm face in the morning, handing her Darjeeling tea that he knew was her favorite. She hears her advisor telling her she is only good, not exceptional, and she hears Peter's voice from the overheard conversation, a little bird that eats from his hand. Her fingers close around the green apple. She does not decide to do it. The decision happens to her, as if her body has voted separately from her mind. She looks down at her own hand and does not recognize it. The weaver drops the silk. Peter is standing on the other side, holding the red apple. Alice? His voice is small. What did you do? The weaver's mouth twists. I expected, most of the time, that it would be the man. But it's always the woman. She is always afraid. Silk threads erupt from the ground, wrapping Peter from ankles to shoulders. He struggles, then stops, because the silk is as strong as iron. Alice can see the betrayal settling into his face, replacing the brief, stupid hope that was there a moment before. She opens her mouth to explain she didn't mean to. She wasn't in control. He has a soul swap spell in his pack, but none of it comes out. And then the clicking begins. It is close now, closer than it has ever been. Alice turns, and the horizon is moving a line of bone creatures, at least a dozen of them, their chalk-jointed limbs skittering across the rocks in a wave of pale, clattering hunger. The weaver hisses something. The silk binding Peter melts away. The creatures are not interested in the goddess. They go for Peter first. Alice sees him go down under a pile of femurs and ribs, hears him shout. She grabs the canister of Lethe water at her belt and hurls it. The liquid splashes across the nearest creatures, and their chalk bindings dissolve with a sound like wet paper tearing. Bones clatter to the ground, lifeless. But there are too many. Alice slashes with her knife, feels something sharp scrape her forearm, and then the air changes. A horn sounds. The creatures freeze. A woman in a mask of fused knucklebones wades through the swarm, twirling a lance. She jabs and sweeps, and the bone creatures retreat, their chalk joints hissing where the lance's edge touches them. Within 30 seconds, the attack is over. The creatures flee toward the dark. The woman pulls off her mask. She is thin, with dark hair pinned up in a severe bun that has come partially loose. She wears a pilot's coat over scavenged robes, and her eyes are the color of river water. She looks at Alice, then at Peter bleeding on the ground, then back at Alice. Her expression is unreadable. Get on the boat, she says. They'll be back. The boat is a flat-bottomed skiff, moored in a Lethe channel Alice had not seen before. The name painted on the stern, faded but legible, reads Norath. The woman hauls Peter aboard, and Alice scrambles after. The current takes them, and the rocks where the weaver sat slide away into the dark. Alice kneels beside Peter. His forearm is torn, and his breathing is shallow. She presses a cloth to the wound. He does not look at her. Thank you, Alice says to the woman. The woman snorts. Don't thank me yet. She sets her lance against the gunwale and picks up a long pole. You're Alice Law, aren't you? And that's Peter Murdoch. I've been watching you two since the Wall of Bones. You're not subtle. Alice stares. How do you know our names? Because I know what you're after. The woman's face is unreadable in the dim light. And I know whose students you are. You're looking for Grimes. She says a name with a particular weight, the way you might say the name of a disease you survived a long time ago. Alice feels the boat shift beneath her, a small adjustment of current, and the woman turns the pole with a practiced, economical motion. My name is Elspeth Bayes, she says. I was his student before you. The professor's. I killed myself 10 years ago, and I've been navigating this river ever since. Alice knows the name. Elspeth Bayes is a ghost story in the Cambridge department, a cautionary tale told in fragments over too much port. The brilliant mathematician who won every prize her first 2 years, then walked into the camp with stones in her pockets, or hanged herself in her rooms, or jumped from the King's College chapel roof. The details changed, depending on who was telling the story, but the core was always the same. The professor broke her. The woman in the boat does not look broken. She looks dangerous. The Neurath. The boat settles into a steady rhythm. Elspeth steers without appearing to steer, her body moving in small adjustments that Alice only catches when she watches closely. Peter is asleep or unconscious below the deck, wrapped in a mildewed blanket Elspeth produced from a storage locker. Alice stays on deck, too wired to rest, watching the Lethe slide past. She learns, over the next hours, that Elspeth's boat is a museum of the dead. The locker holds books Elspeth has scavenged from the tribunal's philosophy, mostly water-damaged but legible. There is a small stove that burns rendered fat. There are traps for the rats that skitter along the riverbank, and Elspeth catches 3 while Alice watches, her movements quick and unsentimental. She skins them with a knife that looks older than Cambridge itself. "That thing how is permanent," Elspeth tells her, not looking up from the rat she is dressing. "I saw you splash let the water on those bone creatures. That won't work on a person. If you die here, your soul annihilates. No reincarnation, no second chance, nothing." Alice processes this slowly. So the bone creatures, they're not alive, they're constructs, animated by chalk and blood, controlled by a magician. Elspeth tosses the rat pelt aside. "A family. The Kripkes. You've heard of them?" Alice has. Every magician has. Nick and Magnolia Kripke were performance magicians who died on stage at the Royal Albert Hall. Decades ago, they cut their own carotid arteries and bled out in front of a live audience. The reporting at the time called it the most disturbing performance in British theatrical history. "They brought their son," Elspeth adds. "Theophrastus. They poisoned him with arsenic so he could make the journey with them. He was 6 years old." Alice feels her stomach turn. Peter, who has come up on deck without her noticing, makes a sound of revulsion. "They've been in hell for decades," Elspeth continues. "They've been collecting blood, chalk, equipment. They hunt living magicians, who descend, drain them for resources. They're searching for something." "The dilithia," Alice says. Elspeth's knife pauses. "You know about that?" "Alice and I talked," Peter says. His voice is hoarse. He has not looked at Alice directly since the Weaver's test. "Yes," says Elspeth slowly, "the true contradiction. A thing that can be itself and its opposite simultaneously. It exists somewhere in the inferno. I've been searching for it for years. If you find it, you can trade it to King Yama for anything. A life restored, a debt cancelled, a soul returned to Earth." Alice feels the shape of something falling into place. That's what the family wants. They want out. They want to escape hell entirely, Elspeth confirms. They believe the dilithia can open a permanent door. No more reincarnation, no more tribunals. Just freedom. "Then we're on the same side," Peter says. "No." Elspeth's voice hardens. "You're trying to find your professor. I want the dilithia. Those are not the same thing." The boat rocks in a sudden cross-current. Elspeth's attention goes to the pole, and the conversation breaks apart. But Alice has seen something in the woman's face when she spoke of the dead mentor. Something that is not just anger, not just old hurt, but a wound that still weeps. Later, when they are moored in a shallow inlet and the stove is lit, Elspeth tells Alice the rest. The boat runs on blood, not the diluted, blue-gray ichor that runs in the veins of shades, but living human blood. Elspeth has been using her own, cut from a wound on her palm that never fully heals, but it is weak fuel. A shadow's essence is a poor imitation. Anything that requires real magic healing, Peter's arm, for instance, needs living blood in significant quantity. Alice cuts her thumb without hesitation. The blood wells red and bright. Elspeth catches it in a small clay bowl and mixes it with chalk dust. The paste glows faintly. She smears it across Peter's forearm, reciting something in Greek, and the torn edges of the wound begin to knit. Peter gasps and bites down on his lip. Alice watches his face and feels, for a moment, the old impulse to reach for him. She does not. Afterward, Elspeth asks casually what they paid to descend. "Half our remaining lifespan," Peter says. "About 30 years each," Alice adds. Elspeth nods, as if this confirms something. He always did extract a price. The failed trap. The boat drifts past the shore of the Greek tribunal during the long gray afternoon. Alice sees shades building fortresses out of salvaged wood and bone, attacking each other over piles of worthless debris. A professor she vaguely recognizes from conference photographs is trying to eat a stone, his transparent hands scrabbling at its surface. Elspeth watches with the detached interest of someone who has seen this 100 times. "Ira is next," she says. "The Wrath Tribunal. It's a swamp Dante sticks, more or less. I need a fresh lamp. The fog gets thick." Alice is not listening. She is watching Peter, who has been silent for hours, and she is thinking about the notebook. She caught Peter drawing something earlier, hunched over his pack, and when he saw her looking, he closed the flap and moved to the other side of the boat. The silence between them is heavier than anger. It is the silence of two people who no longer know what to say. When Elspeth goes below to check her traps, Alice corners Peter at the stern. "We need to talk," she says. Peter does not turn around. "About what? About how you tried to get me killed? I did in my hand. It's just I wasn't in control." "That's convenient." Peter. She grabs his shoulder and forces him to face her. His eyes are red-rimmed. She has never seen him cry before, and the sight rattles something loose in her chest. I saw your notebook, before, in the camp. I saw the organic exchange spell. My name was in it. What was I supposed to think? Peter's expression changes surprise, then understanding, then something that might be grief. The exchange spell. You thought I was going to trade you. What else could it be? A backup plan. Peter pulls away from her grip. I was working out multiple contingencies. The exchange spell was one of them if I could figure out how to offer myself instead of you. The question marks were because I didn't know if it was even possible. Alice feels the ground shift. Offer yourself. I was never going to hurt you. I was trying to figure out how to die in your place. The boat creaks. Somewhere below, Elspeth is clattering pots. Alice stands frozen, her hand still half raised, where she was gripping Peter's shoulder. I don't believe you, she says, but her voice is uncertain. I know. Peter turns away again. You haven't believed me for a long time. The plan, when it comes together, is Alice's idea. She wakes Peter at 3 a.m, while Elspeth is on deck navigating the fog, and whispers, We need a dilithia. If we find it before she does, we can trade it for him. For the professor. Peter is groggy, still half in the grip of whatever dreams the Lete permits. You want to steal from her? She's been down here 10 years. She hasn't found it. We can. Alice. She doesn't want to leave, she told me. She wants the dilithia so she can go home. But she's been here a decade. She's not getting any closer. This is manipulation, and Alice knows it. She learned this technique from her advisor himself. Give the angry man something to want more than his anger. Peter's desire to help, his guilt over whatever he believes he did to the dead mentor, these are levers she can pull. She pulls them. The plan is to use a liar's paradox, inscribed in a pentagram hidden under the rug by the stove. When Elspeth steps into it, she will be bound by the paradox's suspension of truth and falsehood, unable to lie, unable to withhold. Alice will ask her where the dilithia is. Then they will go find it. Peter draws the pentagram. Alice distracts Elspeth with questions about her lamp, about the fog, about anything. Elspeth, chatty, eager for company after a decade of solitude, does not notice the fresh chalk marks under the threadbare rug, but the cat does. Archimedes, who materialized on the boat somewhere after the Greek shore, has been watching everything with the impassive judgment of a creature that has seen centuries of human foolishness. When Peter finishes the pentagram, the cat pads over to the rug, sniffs at the edge, and hooks a claw into the fabric. He pulls. The rug shifts. The pentagram gleams. Elspeth stops mid-sentence. Her eyes go to the mark, then to Peter, then to Alice. Her face changes. The friendliness drains out of it like water from a cracked cup. A liar's paradox, she says. Are you children serious? She moves faster than Alice can track. One hand snatches the chalk from Peter's pocket. The other sweeps the rug aside, exposing the full pentagram. She draws a second circle around it. Greek letters, symbols. Alice does not recognize, and recites something under her breath. The pentagram inverts. The binding turns outward. Alice finds herself on her knees. Peter is beside her, pinned by an invisible weight. Elspeth stands over them both, and her eyes are no longer river-colored. They are black and deep and full of butterflies. You want to know about the truth? Her voice comes from everywhere at once. Here is the truth. I was his student, the professor's. I was his favorite. I won every prize, solved every paradox, and he destroyed me anyway. Not because I failed, because I succeeded, because I was going to surpass him. Do you know what he did? Neither Alice nor Peter can speak. He told me I was nothing. He told me my work was derivative. He told me no institution would ever hire me if he didn't sign off. And he wouldn't sign off not unless I gave up my research, my findings, my name. He broke me in pieces, one insult at a time, and then he told me I owed him for the privilege. Alice feels tears on her face. She does not know when she started crying. I killed myself because staying alive meant letting him win. And now you, his new students, his new favorites, you come to my boat and you try to trap me? For him? Elspeth raises her hand. Butterflies pull from her sleeves, from her collar, from her mouth. They fill the cabin like living smoke, and Alice feels herself lifted, carried, dragged across the deck. Peter is beside her for a moment, his hand reaching for hers, and then he is gone hurled in a different direction. When Alice hits the ground, It is not the deck of the boat. It is mud. Black, stinking, sucking mud. The wrath swamp opens around her like a mouth. The wrath swamp. Alice hauls herself out of the mud by grabbing a root that may or may not be a root. The swamp is a flat, gray-brown expanse of shallow water and tangled vegetation, and the air is thick with the sound of shades screaming at each other. Alice cannot see them, but she can hear them. Thousands of voices locked in eternal, pointless argument, repeating the same grievances, the same accusations, the same wounds. Peter is 10 meters away, already standing, covered in mud to his waist. He sees her, and his face goes hard. "I'm leaving," he says. "What?" "I'm done. I'm going back to the asphodel fields. I'll wait there. I don't care anymore." He starts walking. Alice slogs after him, her boots sinking ankle deep with every step. "You can't go back. The path closed behind us. You know it did." "Then I'll find another way." "Peter." She grabs his arm. He shakes her off. "Don't touch me." "Listen to me." "No." He wheels on her, and his voice cracks in a way she has never heard before. "You chose the green apple. You saw a spell in my notebook and decided I was going to murder you. You never asked me about it. You never said, 'Peter, I found this. What is it?' You just decided I was the enemy, and you acted on it." Alice feels the mud sucking at her ankles. What was I supposed to think? Maybe that I'm a person. Peter's eyes are wet. Maybe that I came to hell for the same reason you did, because I was guilty, because I needed to fix something. Maybe that he stops. His voice drops. "I thought you weren't like him." "Like who?" "Grimes. I thought you weren't like Grimes." This lands between them like a physical blow. Alice actually staggers. The worst thing Peter has ever said to her, and she knows, standing in the mud of the swamp with the shades howling in the distance, that he means it. He means that she is capable of the same coldness, the same calculation, the same casual destruction of people who trust her. "I killed him," Alice says. Peter stares. "Grimes. I killed him. He was doing an invocation, and I was supposed to close the pentagram. I didn't. I saw the gap. I saw it, and I didn't close it. I was so tired, and I was so angry, and I let it happen." The confession, once started, will not stop. Alice tells him everything. The nights without sleep, the months of cold silence from her advisor after she refused him, the way he moved her desk, took her off projects, spoke about her to other faculty as if she were a disappointment he was too generous to dismiss. She tells Peter about sitting in the lab with the professor's chalk in her hand, watching him draw the pentagram, seeing the unclosed line, and doing nothing. "He knew," Alice says. "When the fire started, he looked at me, and he knew I'd seen it. He knew I could have stopped it. And I just watched." The swamp is quiet for a moment. Even the shades seem to be holding their breath. "I sabotaged his article," Peter says. Alice looks up. "The one that killed him. I was the last reviewer. I was supposed to check his work, rerun his tests, and sign off. I didn't. I was so angry about the paper he stole from me, the Russell's paradox algorithm, that I did a sloppy review. I thought, let him face the consequences for once. And then the laboratory exploded. Peter, no, I saw it. There was an error in the pentagram. I was the one who didn't close it. Maybe there was an error in the pentagram. But if I'd done my job, I would have caught it. I would have stopped the experiment before it ever got to the lab." Peter's voice is barely a whisper. "We both killed him. You and I. We did it together." They stand in the mud, two people who have just discovered they share the same guilt, and neither of them moves. The Escher trap. They walk through the night. The swamp gives way to rockier terrain, and the rock gives way to a flat, featureless plain where the sky is too dark to navigate by. Alice navigates by the compass she still carries, the one that points toward whatever you most want to find, and it points them steadily downward, toward the lower tribunals. Sometime before dawn, they notice they have been walking in a circle. Alice leaves crumbs of lambas bread to mark their path, and 20 minutes later, they pass the same crumbs. Peter goes to his hands and knees and begins feeling the ground, running his palms over the sand. When he finds it, he calls Alice over. A perfect circle, inscribed in the dirt, almost invisible. A pentagram, beautifully executed, with no chalk marks visible, just the groove of something sharp pressed into the earth. It radiates outward like a spider's web, and at its center is a hole. They fall through before they can react. The Escher trap, when Alice gets her bearings, is a small pocket of folded space, a cube of gray stone, featureless except for the Penrose staircase that winds around its interior walls, climbing forever without rising. The geometry hurts to look at. Alice tries to follow the stairs with her eyes and gets a headache so sharp she has to close them. The cuckoo clock is mounted on one wall, exactly like the clock in the graduate common room at Cambridge. It ticks. The Kripke family, Peter says. They built this. Can you break it? Alice asks. Peter studies the pentagram lines, the staircase, the clock. His face goes through a series of expressions: interest, recognition, and finally, something that looks like despair. The geometry is perfect. There's no flaw in the paradox. The only way out would be to introduce a new paradox on top of it, something that disrupts the local logic without collapsing the structure entirely. Can you do that? Maybe. Peter sits down heavily against the stone wall. But I need to tell you something first. What he tells her, as the cuckoo clock ticks and the staircase spirals into impossible angles, is the story of his life. Not the professional mask he wore at Cambridge. The real story. Peter Murdoch was a child prodigy diagnosed with Crohn's disease at age 5. He called it the beast, a chronic, unpredictable illness that could flare up without warning, sending him to the hospital for weeks at a time. He learned early that other children treated him with pity or disgust. At his 8th birthday party, a classmate named Gemma Davies told him that everyone had come because company is good for invalids. Peter never invited another friend over. He stopped trying. Instead, he built a persona, the eccentric genius, the absent-minded prodigy who missed social engagements because he was lost in thought, not because he was in a hospital bed with an IV in his arm. At Oxford, he cultivated a reputation for brilliance and unreliability in equal measure. People found him charming precisely because he seemed to care so little. Then he chose Cambridge. He chose it because the professor's reputation for cruelty preceded him, and Peter wanted the hardest possible challenge, wanted to prove he was not the sick child who needed charity. He wanted to earn praise through pain, because he knew how to endure pain. It was the only thing he was sure he could do. The professor stole my best work, Peter says. A variation on Russell's paradox that I'd been developing for a year. He published it under his own name while I was in surgery. A colectomy. They removed part of my intestine. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and when I came back, my research had his name on it. That's why you did the sloppy review. No, I did the sloppy review because I confronted him. I asked for co-authorship, and he laughed at me. He told me I was lucky he'd let me assist at all. He said if I complained to anyone, he'd destroy my career. I was so angry, I couldn't think straight. I reviewed his article in a haze of fury, and I missed something, and the next day, the laboratory was gone. Alice processes this. All the things she believed about Peter, his arrogance, his unearned confidence, his easy brilliance, were a suit of armor he'd been wearing since childhood, a defense against the pity he'd rather die than receive. I have cancer, Peter adds. Or I did. They think they got it all, surgery and chemotherapy. I'm in remission, but there are no guarantees. I came to hell because I thought he stops. Swallows. I thought if I could fix this one thing, if I could bring him back, it might make up for everything else. The stolen colons, the sloppy review, the years of letting him use me. Alice reaches for his hand. This time, he lets her take it. The unexpected hanging. The cuckoo clock strikes. A bird emerges from the wooden doors, opens its beak, and makes a sound that is not a cuckoo. It is a human voice, high and thin, saying, "Found you." Peter gets to his feet. I have an idea, he says. The unexpected hanging paradox. Alice knows the paradox. A prisoner is told he will be hanged on a weekday next week, but the hanging will be a surprise. The prisoner reasons. If he survives until Friday, the hanging must be on Friday, and therefore it will not be a surprise, so it cannot be Friday. By the same logic, it cannot be Thursday, or Wednesday, or any day. The prisoner concludes he will not be hanged at all. Then, on Wednesday, the executioner arrives, and the hanging is a complete surprise. It's a self-suspending paradox, Peter explains. If you believe in it, it works. If you believe the family can't hurt you, they can't. The paradox makes it true. But you have to believe, really believe, and I can't. I know too much about how it's structured. I know the logical flaws. My own disbelief would break it. But I could believe it, Alice says slowly. Yes, you could. I can inscribe the pentagram, set the boundary, and activate it with blood. You step into the center, and you're protected. The dead magicians won't be able to touch you. And you? Peter does not answer. Peter, it only holds one person. The paradox's suspension of uncertainty requires a single belief state. Two people, two belief states. The contradiction collapses. He's already drawing, fingers moving fast across the stone floor. Give me your hand. No, Alice. I'm not leaving you. You have to. One of us needs to get out. They argue. Alice says they can find another way. Peter says there is no other way. Alice says she will not let him die alone. Peter says she does not have a choice. You wanted to bring your advisor back, Peter says. I brought a notebook full of contingency plans. Neither of those things matters anymore. What matters is that one of us walks out of here, and statistically, logically, it should be you. Why? Because I'm already dead. He touches his abdomen, where the surgical scar is. The cancer, the Crohn's, the years of surgeries I've been dying by inches since I was 5 years old. You're the one who still has something to live for. You're the one who still wants to live. I tried to walk into the Lethe, Alice says, twice. But you didn't. You stopped. You're still here. Peter's hand is steady on the chalk. And you're the only person who ever made me feel like I wasn't an invalid. Do you understand that? You argued with me. You competed with me. You treated me like an equal. No one else ever did that. Alice cannot speak. If you stay, Peter says, we both die, and our souls are annihilated. If you go, you have a chance. It's not a choice. It's arithmetic. She tries to grab his arm. He is stronger than he looks, which she has never noticed before, and he pushes her back. The chalk circle is nearly complete. Peter cuts his forearm with a pocket knife, a long, deliberate slash, and lets the blood drip onto the lines. The pentagram begins to glow. Don't forget the pack, he says. Peter. Alice. He looks at her, and for a moment, his face is completely open. No armor, no persona, just a young man who's afraid and doing the thing he has decided to do. Don't let it be for nothing. He closes the circle. The Escher trap folds Alice out of itself like a seed spat from a fruit. She lands hard on the sand outside, the pack beside her, and the trap is a shimmer in the air, visible but untouchable. She can see Peter inside, small and distant, standing at the center of his pentagram. The Kripke family arrives. Nick Kripke leads, a tall man in armor, made of fused vertebrae, his face hidden behind a jawbone mask. Magnolia follows, her own arm missing. She has torn it off at some point, and the stump is wrapped in sinew, and behind her, small and silent, walks Theophrastus. He is still 6 years old. He has been 6 years old for decades. The father and mother go for Peter first. The boy follows. Alice screams and hammers on the barrier, but the trap will not admit her. She cuts her own hand, drips blood onto the sand, tries to draw a counter-pentagram, but the chalk dissolves the moment it touches the ground. Nothing works. Nothing ever works. Inside the trap, Peter faces the dead magicians. She can see his mouth moving. He's reciting something, a catechism maybe, or the paradox itself, and for a moment, the family hesitates. The patriarch tilts his head. The mother shifts her weight. The unexpected hanging holds. Then Theophrastus walks forward. He is a child. He has always been a child. He has no fear of death, because he has been dead longer than he was alive. He steps into Peter's pentagram, and the paradox, designed for one attacker, designed for one belief system, cannot hold against the simple, guileless persistence of a 6-year-old who wants to please his parents. The father follows his son. The mother follows her husband. Peter screams. Once. Alice hears it through the barrier, clear and high, and then, silence. The trap dissolves. There's nothing left on the sand but blood and a few scattered bones. Alice runs. She runs without direction, without thought, through the violence tribunal and into the cruelty, where the landscape is deliberately ugly in ways that feel designed. She runs until her legs give out, and then she collapses on a plain of black sand under a sky that has no stars. She does not cry. Crying would require believing that Peter is really gone, and she cannot believe that yet. She can only carry the weight of what happened, and what she did, and what she said, and what she failed to say. In her pack, she finds Peter's notebook. She opens it to the last pages. The exchange spell, the circled formulas, her name with 3 question marks. Below it, in handwriting she has not seen before, Peter has added a line. It must have been written recently. In the bowl, while she was sleeping. Alice, not the target, the answer. The word is underlined twice. Alice closes the notebook. She puts it in her pack. She stands up, alone on the plane of the cruelty tribunal, and she begins to walk. She does not know where she is going. Ahead of her, the tribunals descend into deeper darkness. Somewhere below her, the dead mentor is still moving. Somewhere below her, the dialethea is waiting. Somewhere below her, a city called Dis is built from the bones of traitors. Alice walks. The pack is heavy, the blood on her hands is dry, and Peter's last words circle in her mind, a loop she cannot break. Don't let it be for nothing.